A lot of people make live edge walnut tables, and I wanted to try something different. So I took a piece of walnut that I had with a live edge, and I'm going to try to embed it into the middle of an ash table and have the whole thing be one big round table. So here's me just kind of preparing that walnut for this adventure that I was on. And what you're seeing me here do is follow one grain line along the edge of the walnut, because what I need to do is cut following that grain so that when this thing ends up being in the middle of the table, it looks like the ash just kind of grew up right next to the walnut and it follows that grain line. So I'm cutting it rough here, and this is a multi-step process that you'll see. So I kind of cut this line out a little bit rough. I don't have this filmed, but I ended up smoothing that edge up a little bit. And then your next step is to take that and draw a line on it, on the MDF that the walnut is sitting on, so that you can cut that, because the MDF, this stuff here, is actually going to be your template. So I'm marking what that particular side of that MDF will be used for, because you need 4 separate templates to do this job. And this is me cutting the MDF out to come real close to matching the walnut, but it won't be exact, and that's okay, because this template here that I'm doing, I'm cleaning up the edge here, this is going to be put back on the walnut, and then you cut the walnut to this template, because you have to have 2 pieces exactly the same that come up and match one another. That's hard to explain. It's a little bit hard to illustrate with the videos that I took, to be honest, but I'm marking the other edge of the walnut in this video clip here. So this is when I'm going to make the other template. And then the tricky part of all of this is that the radius math that is involved when you have a round router bit cutting your template, cutting your piece of wood, you have to take into account the radius of that bit. And what I mean by that is you can't just cut one line and then use that one template on 2 pieces of wood and expect them to match up. It just doesn't work that way. You have to take into account the radius of the bit. That's the best way I can describe what I'm doing here. So this is me cutting these templates out using an offset bushing to take into account that radius math. And now I'm rough cutting the thick piece of ash that is going to marry up to the walnut. And what you'll see me do next is plunge cut and trim that piece of ash. So I'm just kind of going a little deeper in each pass. I think I've filmed, 2 or 3 passes here, until finally you get it to where they marry up. And you'll see that in a second. On the bottom side of the ash, I noticed these cracks. Totally fine, and I love leaving them in because that's where all the character is. But you got to do something to stabilize it. So I cut these ash bow tie keys at an angle. You can see that jig I use on the bandsaw. And then I just smooth those up a little bit just so that they look a lot neater when you're done. So you'll see me clean them up with a chisel right after this. And then you take those and you use those. It really doesn't matter what they look like as long as they're, however you want to see them. And I made some pretty big ones here. You'll see 3 of them. So I lay them on the crack and it goes across it so that the grain is going against the grain of how the crack is running. So you see it goes across the crack. And you chisel them out, you use a router to dig them out. I did both in this project. And then you glue up your bow tie once it's a perfect fit and you put it into place. And what you'll see here in just a second after I get this one in, I've got to clean it up with a chisel first, of course. I learned my lesson. I tried doing it by hand on the first one and said no way, and moved back to the router on the second and the third. So after you get it cleaned up and it's a perfect match for your bow tie key itself, you're going to glue it all up and you pound that bow tie key in until it's flush and hitting the bottom. And then I just use, everybody that has been doing woodworking for a while would use this trick. You use some sawdust that just kind of works itself up around it. And you fill in the little gaps that are around this bow tie key when you're done, just to help hide those gaps. When it's all dry, I just used a hand plane to take them down to get them back to flush with the rest of the table. There's quite a bit of work involved here, but it wasn't bad. I keep my tools pretty sharp, so this went relatively quick. Once I got the whole thing together, you can see how it's all together now. That piece of walnut goes right through the whole table. This is just the big blank. This is the thing I'm going to be cutting a round table out of. But before you can do that, your panel has to be flat. And I don't have a flattening jig. I don't have access to a great big wide belt sander at a big cabinet shop. So I just do it the old-fashioned way, and I do it all by hand. I use my hand plane, and it is sharp, but I will tell you this, that ash is some tough stuff, and this took quite a while. In fact, the handle, I think, is made of apple wood so that you don't get blisters on your hand, but I was getting there, so I had to put a glove on to finish this thing up. But this was relatively time-consuming in the project. But if you don't do it, and you're not patient, and you don't take your time, you are going to see the waves. You're going to see, dips and, high spots in your table. So this paid off. All that hard work paid off. Once I'm done, you still have these hairline cracks here, and you got to do something with those. And so I fill them with epoxy just to finish the look. And the reality is, I knew this was going to be the bottom of the table at this point, but when it comes to the work that I do, I like for it to look like I cared. Top, bottom, side, it doesn't matter. I do care how it comes out, and I want it to be right. So once that epoxy cured, I flattened it off just like I did the rest of the wood. That took a little bit of time too, and then here I am. I think this is the top side of the table this time. You can see where the walnut is meeting the ash there in the bottom right corner. Then I fill in the knot holes after cleaning those out real good. You don't know how anybody's going to use your table. So I fill these in just in case somebody's using it to do homework or something. They don't want their pencil poking through the paper because there's a big void underneath. So I was really pleased on how these two pieces came together. I'm very proud of it, but I will admit it took, I think, 5 tries at those templates before I got it right. It was weeks of work. Partly because I didn't like how they were coming out. They were off by just a little bit. And so I'd go back and do it again. But it finally came out. What I'm doing here, I want to wrap the whole thing around the outside edge of the table. So I took these strips, real thin strips, and I need them to be exactly the same thickness. So I taped them to a board, and I'm running them through the planer to get them all exactly the same thickness. And a planer can be pretty aggressive, and you will see what happens. It tore out the ends here, but this is okay. This is why you make more than you need. It's so that if things like that happen, you can cut off the ends, and I had more than I needed, which was just fine. This is probably the hardest part about starting a real hardwood band, not a veneer. You could call it a veneer, I suppose, but this is actual hardwood that I cut into thin strips. And this is the hardest part about it, just getting it started. You got to get it nice and straight like this so that it doesn't run out by the time it gets to the other end. Once I was done there, I embedded the table legs into the bottom of the table. I don't have any footage of fabricating that steel base, but I made that too, and it's all custom made for this table to fit just this table. I was pleased how that came out too. So this is just me getting that steel frame I just talked about all set. I just got it back from the powder coaters, so I'm marking it for where I'm going to put in my inserts and attach the bottom of that, or the top of that steel frame to the bottom of this tabletop. I use paraffin wax on my inserts. It helps to go into hardwood much easier, and they go right in there nice and smoothly, and you don't crack anything while you're doing it, which is great. And then you'll see me, finally get this thing back in here. And what I realized is that I needed 8 holes and not 4. So ultimately I attached it with 8 different screws just to make sure that it held real tight. This experiment ended up teaching me a lot, and I really like how it came out. Just something a little bit different. I've got 5 or 6 coats of water-based poly on it, and that ash and walnut really set each other off. So another great experiment, and I love doing it. Thanks for watching.